Sophie, a woman of undeniable charm, was the wife of the luxury goods magnate Ahmed. On this sunny morning, she decided to visit the famous Ahmed luxury boutique to choose a special gift for her husband. Located in the heart of Paris, this boutique was renowned for its sophistication and exclusivity, attracting the most refined clientele. The sparkling windows, sumptuous fabrics, and the gleam of precious stones made it a favored destination for luxury lovers. The atmosphere exuded an almost palpable elegance, with each corner meticulously decorated to offer a unique sensory experience. Dressed in a simple yet elegant dress, Sophie displayed a graceful silhouette that highlighted her natural beauty. The dress, a deep black, paid homage to simplicity while accentuating her glowing complexion and elegant stature. Her braided hair, carefully pulled back, framed her radiant face perfectly. She entered the boutique with confidence, her bright gaze and sincere smile lighting up the room. The morning natural light filtered through the large windows of the boutique, creating playfully shifting shadows that blended harmoniously with the opulent decor. No sooner had she stepped through the door than the air was filled with a subtle, captivating fragrance, an olfactory signature marking the entrance into this world of luxury. The sweet scent of rare flowers and precious woods mingled with the aroma of fine leathers, while display cases showcased sparkling jewelry, haute couture clothing, and refined accessories, each more sumptuous than the last. Sophie slowly moved forward, savoring the ambience of the place, her steps echoing lightly on the polished marble floor. Every object seemed to be a work of art, meticulously chosen to satisfy the most exclusive desires of those who entered this space. However, the glamour of the place was quickly overshadowed by a strange atmosphere, a palpable tension that settled the moment the manager, Clara, appeared. Clara, a woman in her 50s with impeccably styled blonde hair and a rigid demeanor, watched Sophie with barely concealed suspicion. Her cold, scrutinizing gaze seemed to judge Sophie's appearance, as if she didn't belong in such a prestigious setting. Clara approached, her stilettos clicking on the marble with almost mechanical regularity, her calculated stride betraying a complete mastery of space and social interaction. "May I help you?" Clara asked, her voice filled with a courtesy that, far from reassuring, sounded false. Her tone was frosty, as if each word was chosen carefully not to commit too much. There was something irritating in the way she spoke, a mix of formal politeness and silent judgment. Sophie, aware of Clara's piercing gaze and the haughty attitude she projected, took a deep breath, striving to remain calm in the situation. Her gaze met Clara's without faltering, a slight smile on her lips, before she responded in a calm but firm voice. "Yes, I'm looking for a special gift for my husband. It's our wedding anniversary." Her words were simple, but they carried the softness and certainty of someone who knew exactly what she was looking for. The importance of this gift wasn't in its price, but in the meaning it held. Clara, after scrutinizing Sophie carefully, pursed her lips slightly. "Do you think you have the money to buy here? This place is for the rich," she said, her tone tinged with condescension, as if questioning not only Sophie's intentions but her ability to belong in this world reserved for the elite. The words, almost whispered, carried a brutal and degrading judgment, reducing Sophie to a figure who didn't deserve to be in such an exceptional space. Sophie, although surprised, held Clara's gaze without flinching. A flash of indignation briefly crossed her eyes, but she concealed it under an impressive calm. This type of situation was not unfamiliar to her. She had learned to face prejudice, to accept that appearances could be misleading, but each new encounter of this kind still left a bitter taste, a feeling of revolt that she preferred to keep to herself. She took a step forward, closing the invisible space Clara had tried to establish between them. There was no question of being discouraged, not today, and certainly not in a place where one should feel valued, not belittled. "I understand your surprise," Sophie replied, her voice soft but determined, "but I know exactly what I want." There was no doubt in her words, nor in the way she spoke them. This was not the first time she had been judged based on her appearance or choices, but she had learned to stand tall in the face of injustice, not to let others define her worth. Clara, still on the defensive, forced a smile, as if trying to mask some discomfort. Then, turning slightly, she pointed to a glass display case showcasing a watch with a gold dial and sparkling diamonds. "This one is a unique piece," she said, almost casually. "It costs over 100,000 euros. Perhaps you'd prefer something more affordable?" Her words, though disguised in a layer of politeness, revealed a hint of disdain. She seemed to want to remind Sophie that she wasn't in a store for people like her, and that it would be better for her to settle for something less extravagant. Sophie, still calm, offered a slight smile, amused by this attempt at manipulation. She slowly approached the display, her eyes scanning the watch without paying much attention to the monetary value Clara had assigned to it. "The watch is beautiful, indeed," she said in a composed tone, "but I'm looking for something even more special." Her words were spoken with complete serenity, as if the absurdity of the situation seemed obvious to her. Clara now raised an eyebrow, her irritation becoming visible. She wasn't used to customers, whom she deemed inappropriate or unwelcome, daring to contradict her suggestions. Her gaze hardened as she observed Sophie, determined not to let her slip out of her control. But Sophie, relentless, continued moving forward, fully determined to choose a gift that, in her eyes, was worthy of her love for her husband, and nothing and no one could divert her from that. Clara, her face set, signaled for an employee to open the display case, eager to end what she saw as a bothersome intrusion. Her fingers lightly tapped against her crossed arm, but she maintained a perfect facade of politeness, albeit tense. Every gesture was calculated to signal her annoyance without breaking the codes of courtesy. The atmosphere between them grew charged with palpable intensity, like a taut string ready to snap. "I warn you, madam," Clara said, crossing her arms, her eyes heavily fixed on Sophie. "These pieces are of exceptional rarity, and only our best clients can truly appreciate their value." Her tone was icy, and her carefully chosen words carried a challenge, a subtle but clear provocation. She intended to belittle Sophie while maintaining the appearance of politeness. Clara's gaze shone with an almost threatening glint, a disguised warning that she was not prepared to give the same consideration to this customer as to others more deserving. Sophie, however, remained impassive. She had encountered this kind of behavior many times in her life, but it did not affect her determination. She knew that the manager was trying to destabilize her, to silence her with arrogance and disdain. But she was not the type to be intimidated. With serene tranquility, she observed the watch that Clara offered her, her fingers brushing the diamonds with infinite delicacy. The light reflected off the precious stone, illuminating her face with a soft, determined glow. She fixed her gaze on Clara, a slight but resolute smile on her lips, a smile that held no trace of conciliation. "Yes, it's a magnificent piece," she said in a measured voice, her tone defying Clara's implications. "But it's not exactly what I'm looking for. I'd like to see something even more exclusive, perhaps a limited edition watch." Her words were carefully chosen, each syllable weighed, and they were the affirmation of unwavering confidence. She made it clear that she would not be swayed by Clara's narrow expectations. Clara, visibly irritated by Sophie's persistence, suddenly lost her mask of courtesy. A flash of contempt passed through her eyes, and she turned abruptly to the employees standing nearby, shooting her a disapproving glance. Then, in a sudden, almost theatrical motion, she called for the store security guard, as if deciding to call on security to handle what she perceived as a problem. Her voice betrayed an impatience barely contained, a suppressed anger that she tried to mask under a facade of calm. "Sebastian, could you come here?" she said, forcing a smile while continuing to fix Sophie with a defiant stare, as if to signal she was ready to end this intruder situation. Her words, though disguised as a polite request, carried an underlying threat. The security guard, a large man dressed in a pristine black uniform, approached quickly, his heavy steps echoing on the marble floor. His gaze landed on Clara before turning to Sophie, an inquisitive look on his face. "Is there a problem?" he asked in a low, professional voice, his tone neutral but with an obvious air of authority. Clara, now standing upright, straightened with icy assurance. In a falsely calm voice, she replied, keeping her gaze fixed on Sophie. Yes, I believe this lady is in the wrong place. I'm afraid she's not here to buy, but rather to waste our time. Could you escort her out? Every word from Clara seemed calculated to publicly degrade Sophie, to paint her as an unwelcome figure, an intruder who didn't belong in this temple of luxury. Her voice betrayed a cutting coldness, and her disdainful look indicated that she had no intention of continuing the conversation. Sophie, stunned by this sudden shift, felt a wave of anger rising within her. She was used to facing discriminatory attitudes, having to fight to prove her worth, but being humiliated in this way, publicly, in such a prestigious place, was an affront she could not tolerate. Her breathing quickened slightly, but she maintained full control of her emotions. She stood tall, her gaze now as hard as steel. I think you're making a grave mistake, she said calmly but firmly, her voice carrying as a declaration. I am here as a customer, and I will not leave until I have seen what I came to buy. Her words were simple, but their weight was undeniable. She left no room for ambiguity. Sophie knew exactly who she was and what she deserved. Nothing would make her leave until she had what she came for. Nothing more, nothing less. The challenge she posed to Clara was clear, and her unyielding calmness was far from passive. It was a response to an aggression disguised as courtesy. She was there to assert herself, to claim her right to be treated with respect, no matter the judgments cast upon her. The security guard, visibly uncomfortable, hesitated for a long moment. His eyes swept across the scene with palpable concern. On one side, Clara, waiting for an immediate response and seemingly ready for a confrontation. On the other, Sophie, calm yet resolute, showing no intention of being intimidated. Sebastian found himself trapped in a delicate situation, caught between loyalty to his employer and the growing discomfort of having to expel a customer who had, clearly, done nothing wrong. He cast one last look at Clara, then at Sophie, uncertain of which side to take, feeling the tension in the air. Clara, increasingly impatient, could no longer hide her annoyance. She raised her voice, and her gaze pierced Sebastian like a blade, clearly fed up with the situation. Sebastian, dear job, she snapped, her sharp voice echoing through the boutique. We can't afford incidents in this prestigious store. Her attempt to smooth things over on the surface only added more pressure to the situation, and Sebastian, although determined to avoid conflict, could not ignore the urgency in Clara's words. He slowly approached Sophie, his face tense, searching for the right words to avoid making things worse. Madam, I'm going to have to ask you to leave, he said in a voice that betrayed his discomfort. I don't want any trouble. His eyes avoided Sophie's, as if he hoped this was all just a bad dream. Sophie's gaze landed on him, calm yet piercing, a mix of disappointment and anger that did not go unnoticed. She never imagined she would experience such a situation in a place that, in theory, was supposed to embody elegance and respect. She then realized that the situation wasn't worth it anymore, and despite her anger, she decided not to escalate things further in front of employees who were clearly overwhelmed by the magnitude of the incident. Very well, she said in a firm yet calm voice, refusing to yield to humiliation. I'll leave. She tried to hold her head high, but inside, a part of her was deeply wounded by the injustice of this treatment. The situation left a mark, and every word, every gesture stung more. But none of these signs showed on her face. She walked with dignity, fighting to keep her inner turmoil hidden. When she arrived home, Sophie entered the living room, where Ahmed was speaking with a business partner, sitting comfortably on the couch. He seemed focused and pleased with their exchange. However, as soon as she entered, a small shiver of concern crossed his gaze. He immediately noticed that something was wrong, and he looked at her with a caring attention, finishing a sentence with his partner. Sophie, are you okay? He asked, a concerned frown forming on his face as his brows furrowed. He instantly felt that something was off, an obvious discomfort in the air. Sophie nodded, trying to hide the pain she was feeling. She gave a smile, as light as possible, offering a discreet smile to the guest to maintain appearances. Yes, I'm fine. Could I speak with you for a moment? Her voice, however, betrayed a nervousness she couldn't entirely conceal. Ahmed quickly excused himself from his partner, and the man, understanding that the situation required his attention, stood up and headed for the door. Ahmed followed his wife into a more private room. As soon as they were alone, Sophie turned to him, her restraint finally breaking. Everything she had carefully kept inside erupted, and her emotions spilled out in a flood of sincere words. I went to your store today, she began, her voice cracking slightly, betraying the sadness she had been trying to hide. I wanted to surprise you, buy something special for our anniversary, but instead, I was treated like an intruder. Her throat tightened for a moment, but she forced herself to continue, her eyes fixed on her husband, seeking his support in this vulnerable moment. Ahmed, initially shocked, didn't immediately understand the depth of the situation. His brows furrowed, and he tried to catch every detail in Sophie's words. What do you mean? He asked, clearly worried. Sophie took a deep breath before telling him everything, slowly but surely. She explained Clara's cold reception, the condescending insinuations, and the call for security that had forced her to leave the store. She spoke of how she had been judged not for her actions, but for her appearance. She finished, her voice laced with pain. Clara didn't even know who I was, but that doesn't excuse her behavior. She judged me simply because I didn't have the look of their regular clientele. The last words left her defenseless, like an open wound. Ahmed, initially shocked, felt a whirlwind of emotions. First surprise, then confusion, and finally, a contained rage. He clenched his fists and turned abruptly toward the door, ready to react impulsively. I'll take care of this right now, he said, anger rising in him. Clara has no place in my business if this is how she treats people. His eyes sparkled with new determination, but Sophie, still calm, placed a soothing hand on his arm, stopping him. I don't want you to act out of anger, she replied in a soft but firm voice. I just want you to understand how deeply this hurt me. That store carries your name, Ahmed, and it should represent who we are. Respect, dignity for all, without distinction. Her words were simple, yet full of wisdom and love. She didn't want her husband to act in haste, but to act with justice, and to use this incident as an opportunity to reaffirm the values they held together. Ahmed took a deep breath, trying to calm his fury. He knew he had to handle the situation thoughtfully. He gently kissed Sophie's forehead, the gesture full of tenderness and regret. You're right. I will take care of this, but I'll do it the right way. No one should be treated the way you were, and I promise it won't happen again. The next morning, Ahmed decided to go to the store, accompanied by Sophie. They had breakfast in silence, each lost in their thoughts. Ahmed was determined to confront the situation, while Sophie, although apprehensive, wanted to ensure that what had happened to her would not happen to anyone else. Upon arriving in front of the store, Ahmed gave Sophie a reassuring gesture before pushing open the door. The employees, surprised to see the owner enter so early and with someone, straightened up immediately, throwing nervous glances toward Clara, who was behind the counter. Clara, upon seeing Sophie, instantly paled. She knew something was wrong. Ahmed, his face serious and with cold determination in his eyes, walked directly towards Clara. Good morning, Clara, he said in a calm but authoritative voice. I'd like you to explain to me what happened yesterday. Clara swallowed, trying to maintain her composure, but the tension in the store was palpable. Mr. Ahmed, I thought this lady. She glanced quickly at Sophie, struggling for the right words. Wasn't here to buy, and I thought she didn't fit our customer standards. Ahmed's face hardened even more. This lady, as you put it, is my wife, Sophie. And even if she weren't, no one deserves to be treated the way you treated her. Clara, frozen, realized the extent of her mistake. She opened her mouth to apologize, but Ahmed interrupted her. Your behavior is unacceptable, he continued. You are supposed to represent the brand and our values. respect, and welcoming every customer, regardless of their appearance or situation. He paused, letting his words sink into the silence of the store. Today, I'm here to tell you that you're no longer part of this team. You're fired, Clara. Clara was speechless, her eyes widening in shock. She tried to plead her case. Mr. Ahmed, I didn't mean to. But Ahmed raised his hand to stop her. There's nothing more to say. Please gather your things and leave immediately. Sophie, who had been silently observing the scene, felt a mix of emotions. While she was glad Ahmed had made a firm decision, she couldn't help but feel uncomfortable seeing Clara lose her job. Once Clara had left, Ahmed turned to the rest of the staff, who watched the scene with worried expressions. I hope you all understand why this kind of behavior will never be tolerated here. Our store must be a welcoming space for everyone, without exception. If you have any doubts or questions, I am here to discuss them. He then signaled for Sophie to follow him, and they left the store, leaving behind a silent team and a new chapter for the business. In the car, Ahmed took Sophie's hand and squeezed it gently. It's over, he said softly. No one will ever treat you like that again. Sophie smiled back, grateful not only for his support but also for his willingness to correct the mistakes in a fair and respectful way. This story reminds us that no matter our position, it's important to stand up for our values and not let prejudice or unjust behavior tarnish our dignity. Sophie and Ahmed symbolize the strength of unity in the face of adversity and the power of correcting mistakes with justice and kindness.